or just post it in the chat if you'd like to follow along. If not, no big deal. You can see up here. Before I start, I guess I would just want to give you some context about why I would even write about this, and where the inspiration for it came. So first, let me just say, when I first started teaching, I was extremely nervous about teaching. I used to have to take shots before I talked in front of people. In college, I got so nervous. So I was, when I started teaching, I was just looking for advice. And I am now in a full-time faculty role at a community college. And when I received some of this advice, the more I teach, the more these ideas seem to ring true for me. So my hope is that the advice is helpful to you as well. If not, I apologize. Not all advice is helpful for everyone. But first, I guess it's just easier, small enough group. I was just wondering, I want to take a few minutes and just think, have you received any advice that is especially helpful to you? Or if not, what advice would you give to new teachers? So let me leave a few minutes, let you think about that. It's just good to take a step back and think about what you've learned along the way, or what advice you have received. So throw it in chat, speak out loud, whatever works for you. So let's take a few minutes and give that some thought. Let's see. A professor I had in junior college told me that some professors may create a barrier between them and the students due to prestige or experience, but that makes it difficult to see things from the student's point of view and understand what they need. Yes, yeah. So I won't say for everyone, but certainly some professors seem to have an ego, and that can cause a big issue with connection. I definitely see that quite often in my current job with a few of the professors. So that is absolutely something to keep in mind. If anyone else has something come to mind, throw it in chat. Oh, there we go. Engage students, ask good questions, and let them talk. Yes. Do not just dictate the whole experience. Ask them to get involved. That is some straightforward, direct, top-notch advice. Absolutely. And again, if someone comes up, oh, here we go, keep coming. Keep students engaged, never isolate. Okay, that is really important. Never isolate and humiliate a student because others will take offense and you will lose the class. Man, that is an important one. I have seen this several times this semester where a professor kind of calls out a student, and it has led to an absolute nightmare for everyone involved, the professor included. So yeah, don't ever humiliate a student. If you need to talk to them, talk to them after class, not in front of everyone else. That is definitely some good advice. All right, so this is just an overview, may look overwhelming right now, but let me just go through kind of what I'm going to talk about, and then we will move on from there. So I reached out to several teachers when I first started, and I want to talk about some of the kind of other advice I received. Then I'm going to talk about one piece of advice really stuck with me throughout the years. And then these are kind of the main points that came from his advice. So I'm going to go over it one by one. Some of them I feel more comfortable in figuring out how to implement it into my own life. Others, I'm still trying to figure it out myself. So I hope if you have any ideas for how to implement these ideas, please, let me know, because I don't have all the answers. So I guess, again, I just want to emphasize, so I don't know, in middle of graduate school, I got the opportunity to teach at Cal State Northridge. Never taught before, always really awful talking in front of people. So I was just desperate for guidance. And so I kind of made a list of all these kind of favorite teachers I had. And I kind of sent them an email asking, like, you stuck out in my mind, especially. And what did you do that made you so effective? And I guess, one of the professors I had who I really, really loved, she kind of called me on the phone, and she kind of gave me this advice that left me a bit, I don't know, disenchanted, I suppose. She gave me advice about, you talk to very practical advice about almost doing less work teaching. So like you could talk to publishers and they will give you test banks and slides, so it'll make your life easier. And I guess that's what she had in mind, but in my head, that wasn't exactly what I was looking for. I was looking for a kind of philosophical advice about how to enhance your teaching, not how to make it easier. So I don't know, I thought that was interesting because in my head, she was a very good teacher, but it seemed like she had just had a different approach. So what I took from that, I guess, was that your personality in class matters a lot. Like it's not necessarily always your materials, but it is how you convey that. And can you become comfortable presenting that information? It's not that, and that matters a lot. So a lot of it is comfortability. But with that said, one of my favorite professors, he emailed me back, and it was, it was just some of the best advice I'd received. And like I said, it just continues to ring true the more I teach. So here it is, and this is the email I received, and I wasn't even sure if he remembered me, but he did. So this is the email. Noah, I do remember you. Happy to hear you're in grad school studying psychology. And thanks. Nice to know you enjoyed my teaching. Okay, now teaching advice in no particular order. Probably the hardest thing for new teachers is feeling comfortable standing in front of a class. You have a bunch of people staring at you. If you haven't been on stage much, it might take some getting used to. I think it's important to feel comfortable in your own skin, and don't be afraid of embarrassment. Being able to laugh at yourself goes a long way, I think. Just because someone looks bored doesn't mean they are bored. Just because someone looks like they're paying attention doesn't mean they heard a thing you said. I remember having a student that seemed annoyed during class, so I was surprised when she said she loved the class. I asked her about why she seemed annoyed, and she told me that she had a bad, quote unquote, rest face, and others have said the same to her. So looks can be deceiving. Being prepared is essential. You can't really wing it with teaching. So have a plan of what you want to do during class. You can improvise how you teach during class, but definitely come with a plan on what you're going to cover. Try to make whatever you're teaching interesting to you. If you are interested, they will be interested. I think the worst thing you can do is send students a signal that you don't care about what you're teaching. Even if you don't care, fake it. You don't have to do all the talk. Lecture when you need to get information out. But if you want them to remember things, it would be good to add some kind of activity, quiz, or discussion to make them practice while in class. Also, adding activities helps you fill class time if you don't have a lot to lecture on. Remember, there's no best way do what you feel comfortable with. I try to inject energy and humor into my teaching, but that's because it fits my personality. But I've had great teachers that weren't particularly energetic or humorous. The number one kind of piece of generic advice I have is be yourself. I wouldn't say teach in a way that, I would say teach in a way that suits your personality. But have a plan for what you want to cover and try to make it interesting to you personally. Oh, and don't be afraid to say, I don't know. Students will ask you questions you don't have the answer to. Better to say that you don't know now, and you'll try to find out later rather than make something up. Last tip, coffee, strong coffee, before class, wine, good wine, after class, or whatever works for you. Good luck. And again, I just remember reading this on my computer one day, and it really stuck with me. Everything that he said made sense to me. And I just really took away, you have to find your own way to do that. So, I mean, the rest of this is almost me trying to muse about how to implement this. And it's not going to be perfect, but it's just some things I've thought along the way, and all of this has rung true to me. So hopefully it's helpful discussing this. And again, if you have tips on, if you disagree with it, if you have tips on how to implement it, let me know, because I don't think I have all the answers, and I'm sure you have plenty of wisdom to share as well. Okay, so the first thing, I guess, so he talks about becoming comfortable in front of a class, and this is, it really is quite important. So, I mean, the essential question he's getting at is, how can I improve my ability to speak in public? And if I recall, this is like the number one fear of people. And again, for me, this was, I was horrified at it and also horrific at it. But it just seems to be something, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And the first few times, I mean, when you first do it, just know that, like, you're not going to be that great at it. But I will say, what was kind of a turning point for me in terms of getting comfortable talking in front of kind of big groups of people is, I don't know, I just started going down this rabbit hole of how to get better at talking in front of groups. And I remember there was a piece of advice that said, a lot of the problem, so to speak, is that your focus is on yourself when you're speaking in front of people. And if you shift your perspective, which is, of course, is a lot easier said than done, well, it can be really beneficial. So next question is, well, where do you shift your perspective to? Where do you shift your focus? And shift your focus to the audience. What do you want them to come out of your presentation with? What do you think is the value in what you're teaching? And how can you communicate that effectively to them? And for me, that was just, that really helped me a lot. It really helped me a lot. And the more I focused on other people and the outcomes I wanted to achieve, really the better I got it. And again, this is not something that happens overnight. It takes time. So be okay with that. Let it come to you. But it is helpful to just get your focus off yourself. And I think that was just very beneficial to me. So I hope, if anyone else has any tips, please, throw them my way, because I'm still trying to figure it out. But that is kind of my musing on that. Give yourself time and it will come, and then get off the focus of yourself. Number 2, so he kind of talks about finding your voice, finding out who you are. And this is, again, this is kind of something that is tough. It takes time. And I think the essential question here is, what, let's say you're comfortable talking in front of people. How do you find your voice in the classroom? And I guess over time, one of the things that came to my mind was we have a lot of ideas about how we should teach, about what it means to be a teacher. And those ideas have come from your previous teachers, the idea that you're an academic. So there's a certain seriousness to the idea that of teaching. And we're also often teaching from a textbook. And I guess for me, what I've found out, just something that's worked for me, is the more I stray away from following the textbook, one thing at a time, every concept talked about in the textbook, I felt like I needed to touch upon, the better I got at just kind of making the class my own. So again, I think there's a temptation to teach directly from the textbook, but I think you need to find your own voice within it. Let that be an outline for you and fill in kind of the blanks. And what has been helpful for me in this is really free writing about each topic, each chapter, and kind of free writing about what it is that is interesting about the topic. Where do I see this in my everyday life? And if it isn't valuable to my everyday life, is it worth talking about? If it's not valuable to their everyday life, more, I guess, would be the better thing to keep in mind. So, and to understand that, of course, you really have to understand who you are teaching. What are their problems? And what is their perspective on issues? So I think this intersection between what you find interesting and what is useful to them, I think that allows you to kind of more easily just be yourself in class, because there's a passion behind what you're talking about. You're not just teaching from the textbook, you're teaching about things that you find value in. And that will, I think that will tend to show to your students more times than not. And I think that passion goes a long way towards it, keeping people engaged in what you're talking about. So a few things to keep in mind, when you're free writing, what questions are worth exploring? How does the material relate to your everyday life? And also, last thing, I forgot to mention this. So a few people mentioned activities and, getting students involved. And I think something I read recently was this advice that talked about making your class an experience rather than kind of this dump of information. And that's kind of stuck with me as well. So how can we make our class an experience for students rather than just this passive learning? And of course, experience suggests that, they do become actively involved. So I think that should become a central kind of tenet of what we try to build in the classroom. And we're not going to always do it right, and it's going to take time to figure out these type of things. But as a philosophical point, as a philosophical perspective about what's driving your pedagogy, I think that is something to keep in mind. All right, I'm going to stop for a second. If there's no questions, no comments, that is totally fine, but I just want to leave some space for it for a second, because I've been talking a lot. So just got to leave a minute. If you want to throw something in chat, if you want to talk out loud, feel free. If not, I will proceed. Okay, off we go. If something comes up, please throw it in. I'm happy to stop at any point. Okay. Preparing for class. Again, the reason why this advice stuck with me is because it seemed to allow for a lot of individual differences. And I think that is a key to good teaching. And this is true for every aspect of it, I think. But one of those aspects is preparation. How do you feel prepared? I have seen people give presentations where they need to, like, they have a script about what they're talking about, and that's how they feel prepared. I cannot do that. It just doesn't work for me. I feel like a robot, so it just like kills me inside. But I think, this is the individual difference piece. So for me, I like to have kind of bullet points, and I can then just talk about those as I kind of see fit. But when you're becoming prepared, I think a few questions become vital to knowing how you want to conduct a class. I mean, what is the goal of this specific class? In PFF, at least when we're talking about building a course, we start by building a course by thinking about the outcomes you want students to come out of the class with. What do you want the students to build in your class? And I think we can take the same approach with every specific class. What is the goal of this specific class? What is the skills we're trying to build in this class? And I think that should help guide you in terms of how you want to prepare for it, what activities you want to use. Really know where you want to go and then start building. And again, this is just wildly an individual thing. Figuring out how you feel comfortable doing this stuff, how you feel comfortable preparing for class, you're going to have to figure out that over time. I mean, a few things that just seem kind of, I guess, a bit more obvious, like review your slides, like make sure you take a look at your slides before you present them. Do your links and videos work? Because I see this as an issue all the time. So always double check those. And I think what is a big thing is preparing for questions. What do you think are some of the questions students may throw your way? And if you prepare for those questions, your discussion of the actual topics will be a bit more varied and be a bit more flexible. And in terms of engaging interest, that should be able to help. And again, the first time we run a class is not always going to be perfect. And as you run classes more and more often, you'll get a sense about what those questions are. So make note of them. What questions come up in your class all the time? And if there's specific questions that come up all the time, well, it suggests your students are consistently interested in a certain perspective related to this topic. So maybe you want to do more research on that, right? So then now you're being flexible in terms of what their needs are, and better kind of creating your class to suit those needs. So I think keeping track of that a little bit, I mean, not writing down every question all the time, but just making mental notes about where students' perspectives are, is a worthwhile endeavor, and definitely something to keep track of a bit. But again, the more you teach, the more you'll get a sense for what best works for you in terms of preparing class. Ben, yeah, I see your hand raised.
Noah, thank you so much. This is such an awesome presentation. I wanted to ask you what you're talking about right now. Do you ever do like a temperature check in the middle of the class? Do you ever just ask people how something is landing with them, or ask them to tell you what they're hearing, just to get kind of a feel for if it's coming across in the way that is valuable or necessary?
It's a great question. I think this is something I'm still trying to get a hang of myself. What I tend to do is I tend to add a check for understanding at the end of my presentation. So I'll take a few questions that I might put on a quiz or something like that, and I will, have them work on it for a few minutes, and I'll see where they land on it. So I'll usually use poll everywhere, and I'll get kind of this percentage of, well, how much of the class got that right? How many got it wrong? It is, I don't think I think there's a way to improve that. I think you're right. You're onto something when you say, how is it landing in the middle of it? I often ask like, oh, do we have any questions? But my sense is, especially amongst community college students that I'm teaching, it seems to be my questions land better if I am asking something very specific. So when I'm asking, are there any questions, people kind of just stare at me with dead eyes. But then I ask a very specific question about something I'm teaching, and now I can kind of better gauge if it's landing or not. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
It
Do
does.
you have any tips? I don't know.
Well, so I'm not actively a teacher. I do
Got it.
training, my employer, and I facilitate workshops. And I'm hoping to become a teacher in retirement
Got
after
it.
I finish my profession. Um, but I'm not sure how I
Yeah.
would do it if I were in your situation.
Yeah, it is it's a learning process. But I hear you on that. So there is a comment. So in the past, when I was teaching ESL, I partnered up with another new teacher, and we reviewed each other's slides and came up with questions for each other. That is great, actually. It helped me because sometimes I had typos that I would never see, but my friend would catch them because they had fresh eyes. Plus, they came up with interesting questions I hadn't considered before. That is great. Yeah, I especially the question piece of getting fresh eyes and what questions come to that person's mind is probably the same exact type of questions your students are going to have. So I think that's a really, really good technique, actually. If you have a friend willing to do that, I would, I don't know. Okay, so next, this one so important. I really want to emphasize this. I am having this issue right now. One of my classes, it seems to be the case that at like 2 o'clock is not the best time to have a class. And I thought I was killing my students with boredom. They were never talking. And when students don't talk consistently, as a professor, you're kind of feeding off the energy of the crowd. And when they don't, you kind of lose some confidence. And then you feel like you're not teaching as well. And it is hard to not be kind of totally impacted by what you're seeing in your class. So I've been having that experience as we speak, and it's been a bit demoralizing. But then what I do is I always do like mid-semester feedback, and I asked them for feedback, and I was a little baffled, honestly, about how much said they were loving it. I don't know if they weren't trying to hurt my feelings or what, but this is just something the more you teach, the more you see this one rings true, at least for me. So if we work off that premise that looks can be deceiving, I think the next question should be, well, how can we really gauge how the experience is for students? And this is honestly really straightforward, I think, but probably doesn't get emphasized enough, in my opinion. Directly ask them. And I think we should ask them in multiple pieces. So one of the things that I didn't do this semester that I wish I had is before the semester starts, asking them to complete a survey. What is going on in their life, like that might inhibit their learning? What prior knowledge they have about the topic? If I'm teaching general psych, what are you interested about learning about people? And if I know that from the start, I can create some flexibility to best address kind of what I'm seeing. And I think this is I'm probably going to make this part of my grade, filling out these type of surveys, because I find it so valuable. So again, like looks can be deceiving. Like directly ask them, how is it going? Make sure it's an anonymous thing. Obviously, something I put in all my classes is a kind of anonymous link where they can give me feedback at any point in the semester. If they like something, if they hate something, just so I can really kind of suit the class to better fit their needs. Or if I say something that's kind of out of line, maybe that'll happen, that I am cognizant of that next time. So I think that's really helpful. And obviously, I think you see this more often in classes is mid-semester feedback. I think you should always add that in. So at the midway point, like how is their experience going? And if it's good, well, you're on the right track. If it's not, have a direct conversation with them about how to make it better. The only time in my life, and this actually happened at CGU, where I thought this was really a bad technique is I had a teacher who asked for mid-semester feedback, and got like all the same feedback from all of us. Like it was very consistent that we wanted more structure in the class. And then the teacher just kind of said, yeah, we're not doing that. So then you kind of felt like, all right, well, what was the point of it? It almost felt performative. Like, what was the point of even asking that? And to some extent, this, you can't make your class, like turn your class into a 180 mid-semester, but you can. I think it's very important to address the students' concerns, if there are, and say, well, I'm going to add this. I'm going to try to fix that by doing this. And if you can't do it, well, tell them why you can't do it. And maybe say it's something I'm going to change for future classes, but there just isn't enough time for me to make that change right now. But I appreciate the concern and the comments, and it is something I'm going to be cognizant of going forward. Again, just ask your student, like, don't complicate it. Just if you want to know how the class is going, ask them. Holly, yeah.
Yeah, just I guess really quickly, two things. One is just another, like, as far as like the way students look may not be how they feel. I know you're talking about, 2 p.m., people get tired or whatever. Obviously they could have things going on in their life. That's kind of one of the obvious things people say is, oh, they could just be having a bad day. I just kind of want to add in that if somebody is like if somebody is chronically ill or whatever, like they might feel kind of sick or whatever, that might definitely change the way they appear to you. Or if somebody's neurodivergent, that might change the way that they come off, right? So those could be other situations, I guess, just to add to like the list of like reasons people may seem uninterested, even if they're not, right? But as far as also giving feedback, I actually had I don't know if you said this or not, because for a second my internet was being kind of stupid, but I think that for feedback, if possible, like if there's a way to make it anonymous, that probably helps too, because then you might get feedback that, people who are a little nervous or might want to be like overly polite, they don't want to feel like they're saying anything quote unquote bad, they might be more likely to say. So, if there's some way, if somebody can make like some form of like an online, like anonymous type of thing, that might also help some teachers that are worried, that students won't talk up about certain things.
Yeah, Holly, thank you. Yes, absolutely. Like it should 100% always be anonymous. That is vital. And absolutely, there are all these other issues or things that we just don't know what's always going on in a student's life or what is thing. So just give them the benefit of the doubt. I think more times than not, that will play in your favor. And this is not something I'm directly addressing in this, but as a teacher, you're going to have to make a decision about what you feel comfortable with, more comfortable with. Having policies that allow students to get over on you sometimes, or having policies where you're too harsh when students actually need your help. And for me, I am much more comfortable with students getting one over on me sometimes. That's fine, as long as I know that when students actually need help, then I'm here to help them. And I mean, I had a student this semester who looked miserable. Like when I was talking, I was like, I must be terrible at my job. But then I found out this person had, his father was ill and he had to work all the time. And he was responsible for like paying for the medical costs. So he was stretched so thin. So it gave context to what I was seeing. Like, just don't always trust your eyes, please. All right, so Ben, how do you handle disagreement when students discuss life applications to the topic and disagree with you and each other? Yeah, it's a great question. Believe it or not, I haven't seen it as much as you'd imagine. And I live in well, I'm teaching a set of students that probably have very different views on a lot of things than I do. So I haven't seen it that much, but I think as long as students are respectful of other people's viewpoints and can justify their opinion without spewing hate or nonsense, we can have a discussion about that. I think where I'd really step in is if there is some just very hateful or ignorant talk and trying to correct that, not attack them, but tell them, like, you might be a little off and there's a different perspective to that. I think, what is odd in our time of age, it seems like just being pretty decent about and thoughtful of other people is sometimes political now. So it's a weird time to be in. But I haven't come across that issue yet. So it's always been it's a big concern of mine actually coming into this job. So if anyone else has some tips on that, please send them my way. But I actually don't have too much experience seeing that yet. Okay, this one I am actually actively struggling with all the time. So if you have any tips on this, I will be jotting them down. When I'm teaching, I am probably most comfortable lecturing, and I make it an interactive lecture, and my students, according to feedback, again, maybe they're just being nice, but they say they like the lectures. I philosophically completely agree that we need to get students actively involved as much as we can. But I definitely struggle with trying to find activities that I like and that I think are of value, and mixing those two together. So the question is, where do you find these activities? And I think what I'm coming to realize is don't be afraid to ask more experienced educators. They've been teaching for a longer time than you, and they've gone through these issues before. So ask them if they have any activities. And then second, if you download the slides, there are a few of these websites that I put forth. This one is across all disciplines. So whatever you're kind of interested in, they have this long range of different types of activities that other people have looked at and said these are really quite good. So this is a really valuable resource. Two, just because this is not going to be helpful for a lot of you, and I apologize, but I'm in psychology, so this is kind of what I know best. The APA, and you and your discipline may have something similar. The APA kind of has this whole list of kind of really quality activities that they kind of peer review and that they give the okay to. So I often look there for activities. But I don't, it's a struggle for me. It is absolutely a struggle. I think more times than not, I am looking for activities that allow students to critically think of and problem solve, and really find their own voice within the topic. And that's not always easy to find. Ben, you mentioned you do role plays often. We break up in small and large groups and create partners groups to wordsmith ideas, solutions. Yeah, I think role play is really, really effective. For me, sometimes I just project a lot for asking my students to do things. As a kind of shy person growing up, I got so nervous during role play, so I kind of avoided that. But I think once I got into the roles, when I kind of gathered up the courage to do so. I always found those quite effective. So please, yeah, absolutely use role play. I should probably do it more often. Okay, and then the last piece of advice that was in that email, and again, this is just something that I've found more and more true, and we all know it, but we don't all do it. And find a way to decompress, because teacher burnout is absolutely a real thing. And especially like, what is it, April 9th, I am starting to get there. And so just do your best to not bring your work home with you. And some of the common symptoms of teacher burnout, be aware of them. So what do those look like? Fatigue, self-doubt, withdrawal, the general lack of inspiration. If you see that in yourself, just focus on yourself a bit more, all right? Because teachers kind of give a lot to the profession. You're bringing yourself to the class all the time. If you have something going on in your life, you don't want to bring that in with you. And so you try to stash it away, or at least I do. I'm always trying to bring energy to the classroom, and it's not, it takes, as a introverted person, it takes a lot for me to like talk to people, to groups of people all the time. It is wildly draining, and you do it enough times a day, enough days a week, it adds up. So, definitely find a way to decompress and, actively account for this, because it is a real thing. Semesters are long. Don't put it on the back burner, because you will get burned. Students get, and Holly says, students get burned out by this point too. It can bring the whole class. Yes, I can attest to this point. I just asked my students the other day, like, you guys feeling a bit burnt out now? And indeed, they are at that point. And I think this is about when you're like close to the end, but you're not quite there. It's tough for everyone. It doesn't mean you don't like the experience, but it's just, there's ups and downs to the semester, and account for it. So, and part of this, this leads to another issue of like, when you feel like your students are at that point, maybe, back up on the work a bit, actively, if you want to give points to kind of decompressing themselves, do it. Like, don't feel like you have to make everything so, I don't know, academically rigorous. These are human beings you're talking to, so account for that. Recognize their humanity before just them being a student. All right, so that is kind of all I have. I hope it was, again, to some extent, this was just me musing about this, because it's really stuck with me over the years. So I hope it was helpful. But if you want some kind of more ideas, or you want to talk about teaching yourself, please feel free to make an appointment with us. We would be happy to help you. If you would like to kind of stay connected with us, please do. There are a variety of ways. We have a LinkedIn. That's probably the best way. But we also post our events on Instagram, Twitter, etc. Ben, raise your hand.
I did. I hope it's okay to ask.
Please.
Time run out. I think we're supposed to stop earlier, but I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit more about finding your voice. How do you do that? If you have recommendations for it, or if it's more personal, I don't really know how you would find your voice, but I would value you talking about that.
Yeah, of course. I'd be happy to. This may not, this may be broad, but I think I did what made me so nervous about speaking with people in groups was I had this mental difference in terms of when I'm talking to people in front of groups, it is formal, and I am just not a formal person. Like, so it was really difficult for me to do that. So how I think what really changed for me was I presented at CGU a paper I did, and I started off by adding just something I found funny. Like I added, it was providing a situation where Skeletor, he's from He-Man, broke up with his wife and he got depressed, and it felt kind of a little insane to do at an academic conference, but it's just kind of who I am. So like I added it, and that could either go one of two ways. Like it could either go terribly and be like, this guy's a joke, or it can go well, because that's who you are, and it will kind of shine. You gain confidence from doing that. For the job I'm in now, I had to do kind of a teaching demonstration, and I added like Godzilla talking to his son about why he's ruining his life. Again, I had friends talk to me as I was talking to them about that, and they were like, well, maybe you shouldn't do that. And I was like, I need to do that in order to feel comfortable talking in front of groups. So I think you just need to, how do you feel comfortable talking to other people? Like just try to be that person in front of groups too. For me, what the issue again was just that distinction between this is formal and this is not. And I feel comfortable doing this and I don't feel comfortable doing that. I tried to get rid of that. And it's been effective for me. So that is what I can kind of say. I don't know if that answers your question.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to add a comment that my professor mentioned in class a few weeks ago, and I was really surprised because it seemed to kind of come out of nowhere. But I'm in a statistics class, and he said that he and a fellow professor had decided years ago, and he's been teaching at CGU for 20 years, that they would worry less about a student's ability in the class, and if they, for example, if it's you were talking about if a student's getting over on you, and he said we can pass the student, but life will fail them. And so I thought, wow, that's very liberating as a teacher, because then you can only do what you can do. And then if the student has, a trick in their back pocket, then that's only going to last for so long. And I thought, because I kind of wondered about the balance, and was everybody really getting everything they needed, and were the exams really indicative of our abilities? And I thought that really is taking one distraction off of your mind, so you can focus on stuff that's more important.
It's a great point. Like, I don't want to be you try to navigate what you can to stop that, but inherent in life is uncertainty. You don't know everything going on. And you just have to kind of, at some point you're making a choice, like, what are you more comfortable with? And over time, if you're going to keep trying to get over on people, it's not always going to work. And I think the teachers that are harsher are actually coming from, I understand the perspective. They're saying, once you get to life, it's like, you won't be able to do this. So I'm trying to train you for that. I just get uncomfortable acting like I know about what's going on, because I can't tell you how many times I've been wrong in my initial judgment. So I think you kind of learn that over time. And I don't think there's always a wrong perspective on that. I understand the teachers that are a bit more harsh. It doesn't work for me. Like, I'm not comfortable doing that. All right, so finally, I'm going to throw up a poll, and this just kind of lets me know, I mean, if it worked for you, if it didn't, how we can improve. Thank you so much for attending. it was a joy to talk about him. Again, this is kind of amusing for me. So it was helpful to talk through for myself. And I will be on for a few more minutes. Feel free to leave, or if you want to stay on and talk, I will be here.
Thank you so much. This
Yeah,
has really
thank
been
you.
outstanding.
Thank you. I'm glad it was of value. Thank you for the questions.